Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Way the World Works. So today I want to talk to you about a person that you're probably hearing a lot about right now, probably hearing adults talk about him, probably hearing him in the news. But I want to talk about why he's so important. I want to talk about less about why he's in the news right now and more about what he did and why he is important. So I want to talk about a young man who was named Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk tragically passed away a couple of weeks ago. And so you're hearing a lot of people talking about him. In fact, if you have been able to escape hearing about him in the last 2 weeks, I would be very impressed. Well, I mean, I don't know that I'd be impressed. I would just say that takes a lot of effort. So I want to explain why people are talking about him in the way that not necessarily about him passing away, but why he was so important and why people are feeling a big loss right now. So Charlie Kirk ran an organization called Turning Point USA. And whether you agreed with them on everything or not, I will admit I did not agree with them on a lot of things. In fact, so they were a college organization. They were a group, a conservative group that definitely leaned more conservative than like the groups I belong to on campus. So I belonged to, when I was younger, I did like Young Americans for Liberty and things like that. But Turning Point was not around when I was in college. Turning Point was a newer thing. And one of their biggest issues was free speech, or is free speech. Turning Point is still alive and well on tons of college campuses. And I remember being in awe when I first heard of Charlie Kirk, because even though I did not know him personally, he was not, a close friend of mine by any means, but he looked up to my group of college activists and those people, like my era, my generation, which makes me feel very old to say. And so I remember, seeing him at conferences and him thinking we were the cool kids, which I don't think we were cool, but anyway, so he started this organization. He was very, very young. I mean, he was fresh out of high school. He was 18 when he started Turning Point, and it just exploded. It blew up. So as much as people thought that the groups I belonged to were cool, I mean, what he was able to do with Turning Point was just incredible. And again, a big part of that was free speech was one of the biggest things that he advocated for. Unapologetic free speech is what I call it. And that means that it's free speech to the letter of the law, free speech for everybody. It doesn't matter if you disagree with them or not. They deserve to have a pulpit. They deserve a pulpit, meaning they deserve to have like a platform to speak on. And so that was really, really important. Another thing, we'll get more into the free speech thing later, but another thing that I've always really admired about Charlie Kirk is that he didn't go to college. So he had this idea for Turning Point USA, and he realized that college was not going to give him the education he needed because, again, whether or not you agreed with him, he was very knowledgeable. He knew his stuff. He knew his philosophy. And this is actually a side note real quick. I think something that we do too often is we assume people we don't always agree with must not be well-read, must not be as smart. And I say smart like that because there's different kinds of intelligences. There's like street smarts, and then there's book smart. There's all sorts. There's socially smart, knowing how to communicate with people well. But he was very well-read. Again, whether or not you agree with him or not, he was very, very well-read. So he decided he was going to get a better education, studying on his own, starting this organization. And obviously, I think that's really cool because, as many of you know, I did not finish college. I disclaimer on that because I'm very open about making sure young kids know that college is not the only answer. In fact, in many cases, it's very wise not to go to college. I went to most. So my disclaimer is I did go to most of college. In fact, I was 3 classes shy of graduating. And you might think, well, then why didn't you just finish? And I didn't finish because I got offered a job. I got offered great opportunities. And in my opinion, college was supposed to be preparing you to get a career. And because I was able to get that career, and it was one of those I was going to miss the opportunity if I didn't seize it now, I dropped out. But I think I see both sides. So I still see a good reason to drop out, because I do think college is not for everybody. In fact, I think unless you want to be something where it's like a doctor or a lawyer where you have to have that education, I don't always think it's the best path. But I also I know that from a personal perspective, because I now have a lot of student loans that I have to pay back for an education that, I don't know if it was the best thing for me. But I bring this up to say that I've always really admired Charlie Kirk for deciding I'm not going to go to college. And a lot of that too was that there was kind of an ideological I don't want to say battle so much, but there's a problem going on when he was of college age. And that was this very leftist, very, if you don't agree with me, we're not going to let you speak. We're going to shout you down at events. We're going to protest. We're going to riot. There was a big thing at Evergreen College. We can get into that another time. That was really shocking. And it led to this creation of what used to be called, you don't really hear this term anymore, but the intellectual dark web, which was this collection of professors and academics and journalists even who wanted to have this discourse. That means this conversation of free speech back and forth where you could debate ideas civilly, nicely. You didn't have to agree with people, but you wanted to debate. And we've talked a lot about the founding fathers, and we've talked about how they used to debate all the time, whether it be in their Congress or through pamphlets, that I love those. So Charlie Kirk really liked that civil discourse. And before I get there, I want to say, if you haven't picked it up already, I helped Connor write a chapter of the Skip College book, which goes through a lot of the reasons that Charlie Kirk decided not to. It's not about Charlie Kirk, but goes through a lot of reasons that are similar to why Charlie Kirk decided not to go to college, reasons that, I decided not to continue my college education. So this is a really, really good book. And parents, your kids just started school. I'm sure some of them started high school. And so if you're wondering what comes next, if they're wondering what comes next, highly recommend picking up that book. I think it's got some good words of wisdom. And obviously, I'm a little biased because I did write a chapter, but still. So all this to say, Charlie made the decision to not go to college. However, a lot of his work took place on college campuses because he was kind of trying to create an alternative to the leftist influence on these campuses. And I wouldn't say that he was part of the intellectual dark web, but he definitely was adjacent. He was kind of next to it. There were some similarities to it. So he saw that. He saw speakers being shouted off campus when they were coming to speak. And he really wanted to do what he could to promote this dialogue. So one of his big things, his brand that, a lot of the videos you see online, is he would set up a table on college campuses all across the country. And he would have kids come, college students, I say kids, but college students, they're kids to me because I'm old, come debate him. So he would give them an opportunity though. He would have everybody come up to the mic one by one and ask him a question and say, why do you believe this? And he would debate back and forth. And let me tell you this again, even when I didn't agree with him, this kid, I say kid again, sorry, this guy had so much knowledge and really knew his stuff. And he had it all in his head at once. I mean, some of us have to look through books or ask ChatGPT where the research is to cite our sources, but he just knew it back and forth. And so he would debate students on campus. And a lot of them were really angry, and you hear their voices shaking and you see that they don't agree with him at all. They're on the left, but he would give them the platform to speak. In fact, when the crowd sometimes would start booing because they saw that they were not, he definitely attracted more of a conservative crowd. And so you'd hear some people boo when they'd have someone more on the left come up and ask a question. He would say, no, give them the opportunity to speak. They have the microphone right now, and he would debate them, and he would debate them civilly. And after, I remember there's one video of a girl just yelling at him about something and stealing his hat, knocking his hat off his head, and security moves to go talk to her or, stop her, whatever it was. And he says, no, let her do her thing, have a nice day. I'm sorry, you feel like you have to treat me this way. So it was very civil. And I'm not saying that sometimes the debates didn't get heated. I want to definitely correct that debates can get heated and still be civil. And I think that Charlie Kirk was very good at that. And the reason he did that is because he was such an advocate of free speech. He wanted everybody to come up and speak their mind. He wanted to, even if he disagreed with them, and he wanted to have this dialogue. That was very important to him because he saw what was happening on campuses and in the world, a lot in the country, I should say in the country, because we have the a lot of other countries don't have the principle of free speech written in any sort of constitution. So for them, it's not a concept. For us, as we know, it is a very important concept. And so he wanted to give them a platform to speak their mind. And he didn't change everybody's mind, but I would say there's probably a lot of people, probably more often than not, he didn't change their mind. But some of my favorite videos to watch of him are where you see him having this dialogue and you see this moment where the person who's disagreeing with him is like, oh no, wait, he made a really good point. Uh-oh, like I have to go think about this. And that to me is the best thing. We get so stuck in our own ways of thinking. And that's not just the left. That's everybody. I know I do. And there's a lot of times, especially lately, I feel when it comes to the free speech issue where I've had to really sit and challenge my viewpoints because I think there's this innate, meaning this natural thing inside of us where if somebody disagrees with us and says something and does something, sometimes we're like, well, maybe that isn't a free speech issue. Maybe we should shut them down for that. And then having to remind myself, like, no, that's what the other side does. We have to be very resolute, very strong in our commitment to free speech. And Charlie Kirk really just embodied that. He was so passionate and so just unwavering, meaning unmovable. He was so firm in his belief of free speech, and he brought that to campuses all over the country. And he was only 31 years old, which is just so young. It probably sounds old to listeners. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, what a young man, because I feel like a granny sometimes, but very young. And he was able to accomplish so much. And he was a real hero for not just free speech, but like I said, I think showing kids that they didn't have to go to college. And there's a lot of people who work for him and that still work for Turning Point that were remembering him at a memorial. And it was funny because you heard them all talk about, he would say, are you about to start college? And they would say, yeah. Or, are you in college? And they would say, yeah. And he'd say, don't go to college, come work for me. And I love that. I love that not only was he saying, don't go to college, but he was saying, don't go to college. I will offer you something else. I'm going to offer you a better, life education, if you will, because education is a term that we associate with school. But as our very smart listeners know, education is not only about schools, but sometimes schools do a really bad job at being a beacon, a place for education. So I really love that. And if you haven't heard of Praxis, this is a separate organization, but Praxis is really good. If you don't want to go to college or your kids don't want to go to college, it shows, it gets them apprenticeship. So they're actually having like real world training. There's like writing workshops, and they will do apprenticeships, which is what people used to do in the olden days, older than my days. I'm talking back in the day. But you study under a master, if you will, or study under somebody who is very advanced or already well along their path in a certain field. And you learn by doing. And I've always thought that was the best way, to be honest, learning by doing, because you're in a college class. And I learned so much about the Constitution in my college courses. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but is it worth being strapped to all the debt? I don't know. Then we'll have a whole other episode on that. But so I lost my train of thought because I'm just sitting here going on so many things. But all this to say, Praxis is a great organization that offers apprenticeships. And so it's teaching you college student age real world skills and letting them go right into the workforce instead of going through a college education that not only isn't really teaching them what they need, but is also indoctrinating college students with a lot of very dangerous left-wing ideology. But here's the great thing, again, going back to Charlie Kirk, that was great. He understood that was happening, but he also understood that kids on college campuses had a right to be exposed to that left-wing, whatever you want to call it, indoctrination, because that is their right. That is the right of the professors to exercise their free speech, just as it is the right of more conservative or right-leaning professors to share their views too. And so this is such an important just exercise of free speech for all, not just free speech for my side, that was just so incredible. And he's influenced countless. I mean, I don't even know that you could put a number on it. Definitely, I would say tens of thousands of kids, but I say kids again, college students. But so as you're hearing him being talked about in the news and you're hearing people talk about how important he was, even people, again, who didn't agree with him on everything, I wanted to make sure you guys knew a little bit about why people are talking about him and in the sense of what is this legacy he's leaving behind. He's leaving behind a legacy of unbridled. Think about like you can bridle a horse, which means to like strap a horse and where you have the reins. I do not ride horses, so this was me pretending to ride a horse. But think about it that as you're being like contained. So he believed in unbridled free speech, so uncontained free speech for all, for everybody. And that's a really important lesson. And the world is a little bit, there's a lot missing from the world of free speech now that influence and that loud voice is gone. So that is why you're hearing people talk about the loss we're experiencing right now, because he was a great free speech advocate. And so, maybe there's some, videos. I believe that one of the Tuttle Twins magazines that's coming out soon is going to be a little tribute to Charlie Kirk. So parents, that's a great opportunity to sign up for that if you want to talk to your kids a little bit about the legacy he's leaving behind. But we will leave it there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, I will talk to you later.